Free agency is almost here, and we have to focus on L'Jarius Sneed. Let's go. Greetings and salutations, and welcome to Ref the District's Player Focus. I'm Nathan Perry. That's the Stoner here on Ref the District on the Believe Network. And our player focuses, especially here in the free agency, are meant to kind of like hone in on potential targets for the Washington Commanders. And we've done a few, Stoner, already. And it's kind of because this is Adam Peters' first go at being the lead in free agency. How do you think he's going to really tackle this?
Well, he's going to decide the trajectory of this franchise over the next 5 years this year, because they have the high draft pick. They've got all of that free agency money. They're going to have a chance to get one of the top 3 quarterbacks in the draft. And he's going to set the tone for all these years going down the road with the new coaching staff and all that. This is a massive offseason in the Commanders' history.
Yeah, and we're right now at the period where we're like, trust everything Adam Peters does. And I've seen that a lot when it comes to, like you said, picking the quarterback at number 2. People are like, I don't care if it's Drake May or if it's Jaden Daniels rather. It's just like, I'll trust him. And it's just like, yeah, we are going to trust whoever he picks, and for now, right? Because he's got a clean slate. Yes. But our job here is to kind of still look at it in a way where it's just like, is this the decision we thought the team should have gone with, and kind of question some things. And right now in our player focuses, we're looking at how we would potentially build this team and where we would want to spend free agent money. And so you've gone with Tyron Smith. I went with Byron Burns. You're looking for a wide receiver, and you wanted Michael Pittman. And today's person is interesting because I have argued on our Wednesday flagship show to keep Kendall Fuller. Not maybe everybody was with me, but there was a lot of people who were kind of in on what you wanted to do. And if you are in on the action and what we've done so far, and maybe have a little inkling to make some bets, make sure you head over to Bet Online, where you can make wagers not just on player information for the NFL, on Super Bowl odds and stuff like that, but you can also bet on the NBA. Just finished up All-Star Weekend. Game action is going to be back underway, so make sure that you head over to Bet Online, make those smart wagers, get that information that you need right at your fingertips. And if you use the code BELIEVE, BLEAV, you'll get yourself a 50% welcome bonus. So how about that? We know that is smart here on Ref the District. Bet Online, where the game starts. So Stoner, I mentioned Kendall Fuller was a guy I wanted to keep. You argued go elsewhere. In fact, that's where you're going to go today in our player focus.
I love L'Jarius Sneed. In all of the research that I've done on him, I just absolutely fell in love on what he does on the field. I mean, look, he's only 27 years old. He was drafted in the 4th round in 2020. Who did Washington take in the 4th round in 2020? You remember? Sadiq Charles. That's who. That's the difference in Kansas City going to the Super Bowl and Washington winning all of 4 games this last year.
Oh, no.
Taking a guy in the 4th round who turns into an absolute stud, which is what L'Jarius Sneed is. I mean, he's a prototypical sized cornerback. He's 6 feet, 6'1", close to 200 pounds, long arms, fast. He's not as twitchy as a lot of these smaller guys, these smaller corners are. But, I mean, when he came out of Louisiana Tech, the one thing to remember is that he was in high school, he was a wide receiver. Mm-hmm. In college, he played the nickel, and he played outside, but his senior year, Nathan, he played safety. And he was actually drafted as a safety. But Kansas City knew right away, watching him, said that this guy's not a safety, he's a corner. And for the last 4 years, he's been kind of building and building. He was playing a lot in the slot. And then this past year, he played outside.
Huge year for him this year.
Massive season. And we're going to kind of look into his PFF grades and some of his other stats that he had, Nathan. But one thing to realize with L'Jarius Sneed, he played opposite of Trent McDuffie. And McDuffie was an all-pro selection.
Mm-hmm. Pretty good.
But most of the time, Sneed was on the number one receiver for the most part. And McDuffie was on the number two, but it switched. But Sneed played a ton against the number one receiver. So he wasn't playing. It wasn't a case to where they're always throwing away from him because he's the shutdown guy. They had a shutdown guy on the other side. So they didn't have a choice to be able to say, well, I'm going to throw away from Sneed. Well, if you're throwing away from Sneed, you're throwing in McDuffie. So it's one of those, darned if you do, darned if you don't. And he still thrived in that situation. Some of the stats to look at, Nathan. Quarterbacks had a 51% completion percentage against L'Jarius Sneed. I mean, that's an awesome defensive completion percentage. Mm-hmm. The QB rating, the QBs, their rating when they threw at him, 56.2. I mean, he was shutting dudes down.
Doing pretty good work.
A couple other things to look at with his stats is that last season he gave up 0 touchdowns the entire season until the Super Bowl. Until the fourth quarter of the Super Bowl is when he gave up his first touchdown of the entire season. That's pretty astounding. He had the one play against the Ravens to where he let Zay Flowers get behind him, but he did get back and help out with the tackle. And then a few plays later, he's the guy that knocked the ball out, the fumble down there, and really changed the complexion of that game against the Ravens. So he is one of those guys who is just he's everywhere. He's physical, Nathan, at the line of scrimmage. How many times do we scream at the TV when we're watching the game and see our corners 10, 12, 15 yards off the line of scrimmage? Well, L'Jarius Sneed doesn't do that.
No. I mean, he's got the wide receiver kind of size, right? Like and you mentioned that earlier that he had played wide receiver. Like, yeah, he gets right up in their face. Fantastic. And you mentioned the Kansas City defense and some of the stats you have on Sneed there. Kansas City's defense only allowed more than 25 points once. The entirety, regular season and postseason last year, never allowing a team to score 30 or more. Great defense. And this would be a piece of that great defense coming to Washington if you get your way.
Yeah, and what's interesting also in whether or not he's going to be able to leave Kansas City, whether or not Kansas City is going to let him leave. Franchise tag is always in play for a guy like that. Kansas City, like most Super Bowl winning teams or Super Bowl participants even, they're running up against the cap with issues with the cap, with Patrick Mahomes making $50 million a year. And they've got a guy by the name of Chris Jones.
I was about to say Jones might get that tag instead. So it's, not so easy. We see a lot of the comments on these player focuses. Well, this person's just going to get tagged. We honestly don't know what teams are going to do with their tags. And honestly, I just don't care. We're looking at who is currently available in the month of February. Tags will be coming up here shortly. I don't see Sneed getting the tag over Jones unless Jones gets a contract.
Yeah. But if he does get that big contract, where are they going to find the money to sign L'Jarius Sneed? And when you have a guy like McDuffie on the other side, who is another lockdown corner on the other side, well, then that kind of devalues your worth with that team, not throughout the league, with the Chiefs. So if the Chiefs are going to sign him, it's going to have to be because L'Jarius Sneed is going to give him a hometown discount. And I don't see that happening. Guys don't normally do that.
No, they're going to get what they're going to absolutely get what they're worth. And they should. They absolutely should. So you're not really going to be able to talk me off of L'Jarius Sneed as far as not wanting him, because of course you would want him. He's the number one corner right now available in most people's books when it comes to this. Now, there happens to be another guy, Jalen Johnson, who a lot of people like, maybe even a little bit more than Sneed. Not here on Ref the District, but tell me why you would pick Sneed over Jalen Johnson.
Well, I think possibly because he may be able to come a little bit cheaper because of some of those things I said about Kansas City with their cap situation. If they let him go, maybe he's not going to get the sort of love on the open market. And same with Jalen Johnson, because Jalen Johnson, I think, is maybe listed on a lot more boards as the number one corner. So
Really?
he's going to get that bigger contract. So you're kind of getting like a little bit of a discount with L'Jarius. You're getting the number two corner. You're not getting William Jackson III, the number one corner in the free agency. You're getting the number two guy.
Starter loving to bring up other people and just smashing them
It's
while we're
like,
trying to do a player focus. Sadiq Charles and William Jackson III just taking strays here
hey,
on today's Ref the District.
I'll take pot shots at guys who did not work out very well for this team.
Sure.
But there's a lot of similarities in their games. The difference really, when I kind of compared the two, look, Jalen Johnson was the number one corner in the entire NFL in terms of PFF grade for their overall score.
For those who really like that kind
right. For those who, are going to use that to their advantage for their argument. But I mean, Sneed was 30th in the league overall. The difference is this, is Jalen Johnson is just a pure corner. He's a pure shutdown corner, which is great. You love that. He's not going to get mixed up in tackling. He's not going to be blitzing the quarterback in terms of what he's done the last 4 years. I'm not saying if he comes here, he wouldn't do that, because maybe the defense will ask him to do that. But Chicago never asked Jalen Johnson to get after the quarterback. Chicago never asked Jalen Johnson to mix it up. That's what L'Jarius Sneed will do. I mean, Jalen Johnson had a 0 grade in pass rush, which means he never once rushed the passer. Never once this past year for the Bears. Whereas L'Jarius Sneed had 18 pass rushes. I mean, that's 1 a game on average.
Sure.
But still, it's a lot more than Jalen Johnson.
And I would say, from your cornerback perspective, when you're cornerback 2 compared to cornerback 1, which Sneed is a 2 on Kansas City and Johnson's a 1, I'm probably not rushing my 1 all that often either.
That's fair. That's fair, but you do want to at least have a guy who is willing to. Maybe
you can't tell me that Jalen Johnson isn't willing to.
You're right. I don't know that, but that could be why they didn't do it. Who knows? That's for the insiders with the Bears will be able to tell us. But Kansas City did want him to get mixed up in there a little bit, but every single PFF type grade that he had was basically all top 30, whereas Jalen Johnson was number 1 in some, but he was 45th ranked corner against the run. That's what Jalen Johnson was. PFF grades. Take it for what it's worth. But again, for coverage, Jalen Johnson's your guy. But if you get the 30th ranked against coverage type corner in Sneed, and he's also willing to get after the quarterback, and he's also willing to mix it up in the run game, that's what you want. When Dan Quinn said that this defense, and Joe Whitt Jr. said that this defense is going to be physical, they're going to get to the ball, and they're going to create turnovers, and they're going to explode with violence, and they're going to be explosive, all that stuff, that's the kind of guy that they need, and that's L'Jarius Sneed.
All right. Well, like I said, I like Sneed. I'm not saying I don't. I did say I would stick with Fuller. I think the contract would be a little bit better for Washington, and that's probably the only reason why you wouldn't want to go with a guy like L'Jarius Sneed is he's going to cost a lot. What do you think it's going to take to bring him into Washington?
Yeah, different models, if you will. Like when you're checking the weather, and sometimes you use like the European model, and sometimes you use the North American model, and you get different predictions for the weather. So I've seen it kind of all over the place, but basically you're talking about $15 to $19 million a year, AAV, average annual value. That's a lot of money, Nathan, to pay one guy, when, again, you're talking about if they've got $80 million and you're spending close to 20 on one guy, it's 25% of your cap on one guy. Is Kendall Fuller going to cost that much? Probably not. Is another corner who's further down the list going to cost that much? Probably not. Do you want to have St. Juste, Forbes, and Quan Martin be your 3 corners if you're going to put Quan Martin in the slot? Is that going to cost? Obviously not. But this guy's a difference maker, Nathan. L'Jarius Sneed is somebody that would fit great in the Dan Quinn type of defense. And because he's played corner, outside, he's played slot, he's played safety. I know we don't like to use this phrase around here anymore. I'll have to.
Do not, Stoner. Do
position
not do it
flex.
to us.
Position.
He did it. Said the
The-
word.
We don't like to say it, but I guarantee you that coaches love a guy who can play different positions.
Sure.
So I think Dan Quinn would love a guy like L'Jarius Sneed and Joe Whitt Jr. I'm giving Dan Quinn too much as the head coach. Joe Whitt Jr. is the guy who's going to work with him every day. So Joe Whitt Jr. would love a guy like L'Jarius Sneed.
Joe Whitt Jr.'s done some special things with some defensive backs. So, I mean, like it might be good here for Washington to grab L'Jarius Sneed. Now, I did want to clarify one thing that you'd said. It would be a quarter of the open cap space that Washington has to spend, not the entirety of their cap space. I know we've already got that comment on our YouTube page right now that says it's not a quarter of the cap space. So I just wanted to address that. And of course, we are interested in hearing from you. So let us know right there in the comment section if you're watching this on YouTube, if you agree with Stoner and you'd want L'Jarius Sneed here, or maybe you're a Jalen Johnson fan or a Kendall Fuller guy. Let us know in the comments who you would like to see at cornerback for the Washington Commanders. This is a player focus presented to you by Don't Sleep Energy. If you head out to don'tsleepenergy.com, you can use the code DISTRICT to get 10% off your order. Energy drinks, energy shots. They've also got gear, wonderful logo to kind of walk around with, by the way. It's fantastic, fantastic people that we work with, and also just great products. So again, use the code DISTRICT at don'tsleepenergy.com. That's who's presenting your player focus here on L'Jarius Sneed. We are pushing out these player focuses, so let us know who you would like to see and one of these focuses, and we'll try to do a deep dive on that individual and see what we think about them as well. Of course, you can also join the conversation every Wednesday at 7:30 Eastern, where we go live to talk about all things Washington Commanders. And if you're listening to this on audio, make sure you leave us a rating and review, of course. And so like, subscribe, all that good information. I'm Nathan Barry. That's the Stoner. This has been your player focus here on Ref the District, presented to you by Don't Sleep Energy and Bet Online. And until next time,
go get L'Jarius Sneed. You'll be happy.
Be a fan.